So let's get started. If on the MMA side of things, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So first question, tell me how you got started.
I got started when I was living in Mexico City. My aunt and my parents wanted me to be better at English because everybody, as you probably know, we're taught a foreign language at a very young age. And of course, English was the main one that's taught over there. And I was in first grade. So we went to this place to enroll me in English classes. And there was also a Taekwondo school. And I wanted to go there. So they're like, well, I guess he's going to be in the same building annex. Why not just give him that too? So I started training there. And then I had a foot injury where I cut my foot with a bottle glass. So I stopped for a few months, and then those months turned into years. And then I didn't pick it up again until after I moved here to the US, and I had more and less assimilated to the culture to the point that I felt comfortable participating in things outside my house. And that's when I started doing martial arts again at the age of 12 with Taekwondo.
So your first discipline is Taekwondo?
Correct, yes.
Correct, yes. So, and how old were you? Did you say you were 12?
Yeah, I was 12 when I picked it up again and never left it.
Yeah, brilliant. So am I right in saying, are you 28 or 29?
29.
29.
Yeah,
so
29.
So becoming a bit of a veteran in the game, you could say?
Perhaps not in the fighting of MMA, but in the realm of competition and martial arts. I mean, that's how I grew up. That's all I know. But
yeah.
As far as the MMA specifically, I'm still kind of a novice when it comes to what goes into it behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You know?
Of course, yeah. Obviously, you're pretty young in your career. You've only got 9 fights. But in terms of, a martial art discipline, you've been training martial arts for more of your life than you haven't.
Yes, that's definitely the case.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So you had your fight last Friday, LFA 90.
Yeah.
Got your second round submission. Tell me a little bit about preparing for the fight with the current circumstances. How is the situation over there in terms of the gym? Did you get a lot of sparring? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my last fight was in March, and as soon as that was over and the whole COVID started a few weeks afterwards, it was around March, and my last fight went pretty well, and I didn't take a lot of damage. So I was ready to jump back in. I was expecting to fight again within the next month or two in June or July. And then that happened. The gyms were closed. Things were different. I knew I didn't want to stop training, so I just kept training with my friends at her house. They have a gym. I kept my sparring. I kept everything, just not at the gym. I just looked for my friends who I train with every day, and because they feel the same way, it was easy for us to get together and continue our training at each other's homes and what have you. And that was all leading up. So I was expecting to fight at any moment. I don't know when they were going to be open. We didn't know if they were going to fight. We had no clue. But the thing that I did know was that if I got called and I wasn't training, then I wasn't going to be successful. Yeah. So we just stayed pretty much on fight camp the whole time leading up to this fight. And of course, it wasn't as intense as it was the last 6 weeks, leading to, because then we had a date, we had a name, and we had a location. Once we had those 3 things, then we took it really seriously when it comes to the training, as opposed to a very nonchalant, let's show up, roll a little bit, drill a little bit, whatever. And then again, once we had the date, the name, and the venue, we tuned in to my opponent more specifically, and it was very easy to hop on that fight camp because, like I said, we had already been training without stopping this whole time. And leading up to it, we had a different opponent, actually. I forgot his name. But the reason why he dropped out was because he went back to the UFC Contender Series. Oh. So I was originally supposed to fight him. And when he got called, of course, you can't refuse that call. So he went there. and then I was given Lloyd McKinney, which was the one that I wanted to fight on the card around September. So there was another card in September. They were going to offer me this fight, but I wanted someone with more experience. I wanted to fight someone who had been in the game more, because if I want to grow as a fighter, if I want to be known, if I want to make sure that people realize that I'm going up there, I'm not going to do that by beating people with no experience or by beating people with low records. So I said, I think I need to get smarter about which fights I picked. Let me pick the ones that will present challenges. Let me pick the ones that people will see and say, hey, this is a fight to take. If you do defeat this person, then we know you're getting better. And so that's why I picked Lloyd McKinney, that September card. And he got married, which was really good. Congratulations to him. He was on his honeymoon, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to make the fight. But I'm sure he had a great time. And when it came to this card here in November, he was ready to go, and I was happy that he was the replacement for my original fighter, because he was the one that I wanted to have in the first place. And leading up to it, we knew he was a wrestler. We knew he wanted to be aggressive. We knew he had a lot of experience with 20 fights professionally. I really don't know how many amateur fights. So that was the fight to take. And so in preparation, it was just making sure we have our conditioning, making sure we had the weight cut so that we can maintain the conditioning that we're building, and then just focus on the holes in the game, which for me has been jiu-jitsu. And now, we're beginning to be more comfortable. And as the last fight proved, we are beginning to fill those holes very fast.
Yeah. What was so you're talking about jiu-jitsu, was the game plan to go to the ground with McKinney, or was the game plan to I know you got the submission finish, but what was there a specific game plan?
The specific game plan for me was to maintain the pressure in striking. We knew he was a wrestler, so we knew we were going to spend time on the ground. And we weren't for sure how much time he was going to want to strike with me. But it was apparent that he didn't. And we were expecting him to not, because he's a wrestler. So we trained a lot for jiu-jitsu. We trained a lot from the ground. We trained a lot from being comfortable in getting there, being there, exiting or executing from there. We spent a lot of time being on the ground, specifically for that reason, for the fact that we knew that his best chance to defeating me would come from the ground. And that's how we prepared. My goal, once that had been addressed, my goal coming into the fight was to keep the pressure striking, to make sure that whatever decision he makes, whether if he wanted to strike or to engage into the grappling, it would come from being pressured to do so, and not because he found his space. So I made sure that the striking was consistent. I made sure that I kept pressure on the striking, and I made sure that I didn't go back forward, because that would have just given him a takedown without a fight. It was not a fight for me to have been in a counter striker mode. Counter striking was not going to win this fight. It would be pressure.
Because as a wrestler, he would prefer to have you maybe up against the cage, or in that kind of, that squeezed position up against the fence. So
Correct.
So your plan was to keep the pressure on him, so to nullify that kind of aspect of the fight.
Correct. Yes. So just keeping the pressure, and just make sure that if he shoots, it's because he feels like he needs to, and not because he feels like he wants to.
Yeah, or he can, type of thing.
Or he can. Yeah.
And so you're talking about your jiu-jitsu. Was there a lot of work put into your jiu-jitsu? Because looking on your records, you have your 8 wins, you have 50% are no submissions. So from the outside looking in, you could say that you're talking about your jiu-jitsu maybe being an area of weakness, but from the outside looking in, it looks like a strong point. So was the idea to maybe try and work for a choke if the fight got there?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to seize the opportunity as soon as you're seeing it. And when I'm here at training, that opportunity is found upon me, and I'm the one getting the worst position, because we have really amazing grapplers here at the gym. So whenever I say I work on my jiu-jitsu, it's with the mindset that when I come to the gym, I'm getting throttled.
Yeah.
I'm getting passed, I'm getting choked, I'm getting taken down, and I'm getting held down. So that's why I feel, okay, well, I need to get better at my jiu-jitsu. And when it comes to the fights, I have no clue what the experience of ground game my opponents will have. I can only assume they will, at the very, very least, have a high school wrestling, and we have high school wrestlers here, and they're really good, and they take me down. So we have to expect for them to be at least that or better. And with that expectation, I focus a lot on my jiu-jitsu, and sometimes, I guess as we can see most of the times, it shows to be the way to victory for me, although it is not what I'm hunting specifically.
Yeah.
I don't really hunt for a takedown to submit you. My goal, my desire, what I like to trade leather. I like to make sure I can hear the impact of flesh. That's what I'm aiming for. That's what I like. And perhaps that's why people take me down, because they either know that they're more comfortable on the ground, or they just don't want to trade.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. So knowing that that's what people like to do, I like to make sure that I know what to do once they do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose as well, it's a good position to be in, feeling so comfortable in your striking that you almost know that the vast majority of opponents are going to want to take you down. That
Correct.
must be a good position to be in. Okay, so this was the main question I wanted to ask you. This was, if I could only ask one question, this would be it. You're 8-1. You've now, on last Friday, you got the record for the most wins in LFA history. Am I right in saying you're next for the vacant LFA title?
I would say so too. I would say so, but at the very end, it's up to the LFA. What are they going to want to do? Do they want to give me a title shot, or do they want to give me to the UFC? I really don't know. I don't think it would make any sense for me to not go any farther up, and the only way to make progress at this point is to either have an LFA title shot or to be moved to the UFC. I mean, maybe this is a question I would like to ask you as an outsider, because I'm not really in it. I mean, do you think that it should be a title shot, or do you think it should be a promotion to the UFC? Because as an outsider, you'll be able to see it from a very third party point away. If you asked me, I would tell you the same answer 2 years ago.
If you want my opinion would be, if you were to take your next, if we say the three options, let's lay them out. The three options that you would desire next would be straight into the UFC, maybe a contender series fight, or an LFA title. Is that fair?
That sounds fair. Yeah. That's great.
So my thing, just thinking about it from the outside looking in, if you were to come into the UFC having one more fight, so as opposed to 8-1 or 9-1, but with that LFA title behind you, it might help you to progress up the ranks a little bit further, as opposed to maybe starting towards the bottom or the middle of the division. You're coming in with a little bit of heat on your name. So obviously it's dependent on what these organizations want to do with you, but for me, any of them three options sound good, to be honest.
Yeah.
Have you had
sound good.
Have you had any contact from the LFA or the UFC, or is it a little bit too early after your last fight?
I think it's a little too early, especially because of the holidays coming up. Although planning is being done, nothing is really set in stone right now, and nothing will be set in stone anytime soon, because again, we're closing in the year and the holidays happen. And as we all know, the people in the LFA are people too, and they have families, they have lives that they want to attend to. So I think we're all okay with just waiting until this is over and getting back to making solid plans.
Yeah.
Once next year begins.
And I believe I'm right in saying there's only one more LFA show scheduled this year as well. So even though you had a reasonably quick submission, it was only about 2 minutes into the second round. Maybe it's probably a bit too short, isn't it, to get on that card in December? So we're probably looking at when would you want to get back in the cage?
I would like to get back in the cage, and I think we're going to get back in the cage sometime in the beginning quarter of next year. So any time frame between January and I'm guessing March or April, we probably have fight.
Oh, okay. And hopefully it will be one of them 3 options that we've laid out.
Hopefully it will be one of those options. That would be great. At that point, I guess really right now, the only focus is let's expect either one of those shots and prepare for such caliber of a fight.
Yeah. That's a good outlook to have, isn't it? And the other thing is, especially with this situation, you could argue that the implications of COVID are maybe tailing off a little bit, but fights are still falling out. So there may be them short notice opportunities, both in, I don't know when the Contender Series is back, I think it is early next year, but even in terms of, the UFC, there might be a short notice opportunity there as well. So, I think what you were saying about staying ready is a good place to be.
Yeah, I think that, it's very common for the UFC to bring in new fighters at short notice. As a matter of fact, most of the time, that's the only way they do it. It's we need another one who's stepping up, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to stay ready, is because we know that the UFC calls on short notice, and we want to make sure we're already ready.
Yeah. So maybe another question I wanted to pose to you is, let's have a little bit of a talk about the actual division itself. Flyweight has been one of them divisions that I would suggest hasn't had its fair due, I would say. There was obviously the talk in the UFC of maybe cutting the division. That was by the sounds of it, a genuine idea that was posed. But in the last weekend at UFC 255 and the upcoming card, the flyweights are the main event twice. So tell me a little bit about the division as a whole and where you fit into that.
Well, the division as a whole, it's a very dynamic division, because it's a flyweight, because it's a lightweight. I mean, people are very small there. There's a lot of technique. You have to take into consideration that although that division exists, most flyweights don't train with other flyweights. It is very rare to have a camp of just flyweights, even with women. So having that, when people train for fights, they're obviously training with people way bigger than them. So flyweights are constantly training with partners, grapplers who will outweigh them and are more powerful. And because of that, flyweights, I will say, that are the most technical fights, because they have to use that on the regular basis. They are having to use correct technique to make sure that they don't become outpowered, or they don't become slower, or get caught in something that they shouldn't. And it just develops a very technical way of fighting. And then when you put those two together, to people who have been training, have been forced in a way to train in that manner, then you see very dynamic striking, you see very dynamic grappling, you see very meticulous movement and footwork. So as far as the flyweight division goes, in my opinion, I think is the most technical. And if you want to get a KO in flyweights, it's difficult. Why? Because the mass is not there. So when you see a knockout in flyweight, you know that not only that fighter has the power to do so, but has the absolute skill to have been able to do it. Because you can't just punch somebody my size, can't just knock someone out by a Hail Mary punch. It has to be set up. It has to be precise.
Yeah.
And I think that if people knew a little more about the intricacy of such movements, then they would appreciate good flyweight fights and know why what they just saw is at its most skill. You
Yeah.
know, you see a lot of people, a lot of fights who get taken down, fighters get taken down, getting KO'd. These are really heavy dudes. You know, almost anyone would get dropped by a super heavyweight punch. You know, even if it barely graces you. If somebody just runs up on you and grabs you, they're gonna tackle you if they're two something. You know,
Yeah.
they don't have to look pretty. And where do I stand in the flyweight division? I don't know yet, and I think that's what's fueling me is because I want to know. I want to find out. I want people to put other people in front of me and say, "Okay, are you here? Are you here? Are you here?" And the reason why I work hard is because I want to make sure that if I step up, not knowing what my partner, my opponent has been working towards or how hard they've been working towards, and there's no way for me to know that, but if I make sure that I work as hard as I can, then I guess there's nothing else that I can do other than that. You know, I want to eliminate every room of doubt or every room of potential weakness so that when I step up short notice or not against an opponent that I don't know how they train, I'll feel confident that I have all my bases covered. And I want to know how far up I get doing that. You know, I want to know how far up I can get, hopefully the title at the UFC. That's of course the ultimate goal. So just watching, getting ready, getting prepared, and staying ready for what may come. Because this division, the flyweight division, it's a tough one. It's a tough one for the reasons we already explained. You know, we are skilled fighters who have to develop proficient technique and proficient conditioning to
Yeah.
be able to fight at that division.
Yeah. I suppose maybe this might sound obvious, but trade-off between, the size of somebody's fist or the size of somebody's body and the size of their chin is not, as we're saying, it's not comparable, is it?
Yeah,
Your chin or your actual head is not that much smaller than, let's say, a Stipe Miocic's compared to his body, compared to his hands. So I think that's a good point, and I think for real MMA fans that the smaller divisions, whereas maybe the power goes down, and then flush knockouts maybe decrease, the skill level in fights it increases tenfold.
yeah. I think that's a very good correlation. And that's why you see heavyweights with good technique just running through everybody. Because most of those heavyweights have been getting away with bad technique. And when you get a heavyweight that has focus on developing the technique and then they have both, then they're forced to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And then the opposite happens with flyweights. The only exception is that it's more difficult for a flyweight to develop more power and mass and remain a flyweight.
Yeah, of course, and that's what we see in maybe Davis and Figueiredo now. We I think it's quite clear how much power he has, but he is struggling to make the weight a little bit now, isn't he?
Yeah.
So maybe the last question, then I'll get you out of here. Previous title holders in the LFA in your division, I'll name some of them: Casey Kenny, Brandon Moreno, Brandon Royval, and recently signed Jimmy Flick. What does that say about the quality of LFA?
What does that say about the quality of LFA? I think that says that, well, I can only speak on the flyweight division, you know, because of the reasons we just explained. You know, the LFA, really any fighting promotion wants exciting fights. They want to see skill, they want to see power, they want to see knockouts, they want to see takedowns, they want to see a fight. A fight isn't someone pulling guard, a fight isn't someone cowering and moving until they get a strike. They want to see two people stepping in and fighting. So all those people that you just mentioned, they're not scared to trade, they're not scared to take people down. None of those people stay at a leisurely pace when they fight. All of those people, if when they fight, it is a go, 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 go. So when it comes to the flyweight division, I think the the LFA's quality is people who do not let the foot off the gas. They just go at it. The LFA really takes their fighters very seriously, and they're very professional with the weights too. They make sure that people are either on weight or they ask. They don't just let people fight.
Yeah.
They don't just let people fight. So I appreciate that about the LFA. I think their quality and their expectations for their fighters has been proving to be great. I mean, every week you see so and so LFA fighter to the UFC, so and so LFA fighter going to the UFC, and I think there's something to said about that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last question. This is a bit of a quick fire one. I want the first answer that comes to your head.
All right.
Them 3 options that we laid out: LFA title, contender series, straight to the UFC. If you could choose which one of them 3 to have, which one would you pick?
I would say straight to the UFC.
Straight to the UFC. And do you feel at this point that there is nothing else in the way in terms of your skill level? If you went into that division now, you could really make your mark.
I would say so. I would say that at the very least, it will be a fight that people would want to watch.
Yeah, brilliant. And if very last question, because I do this sometimes. I say last question about 2 or 3 times. It's one of my bad habits. If you were put in the UFC now, who would you want first?
I think that right now I'm not in a position to pick. So I would say I will prove myself by stepping into someone they pick. Who do you think is my test? I would ask. And if that's what it is, then that's what it is. I think that the spirit of a fighter is that you don't get to choose what you're going to be faced against.
Yeah.
And the true spirit of the fighter comes out when whatever's put in front of you and you tell yourself, well, we're going to fight through this one. That's what we're doing.
Brilliant. Well,